Black CEO, humiliated with cake by white gala host. Then, she erased their $4. 2B empire overnight. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Oh my God, eat white cake, hide black. The words sliced through the laughter like glass through silk. For a heartbeat, every chandelier in the ballroom seemed to flicker. The music choked mid-note. The air changed temperature from champagne warmth to marble cold. At the center of the hall stood Ava Monroe, tall, poised, her skin gleaming beneath the golden light, now splattered with streaks of white frosting. Across from her, Lydia Fairchild, the gala hostess in a scarlet gown, held the silver cake knife like a trophy. Her laughter was crystalline, vicious, contagious. Guests gasped, then laughed, because laughter is easier than courage. Phones lifted like a synchronized salute. Screens glowed. Cameras fed the humiliation to the cloud before anyone could blink. Ava didn't move. She stood motionless amid the ring of amusement, frosting sliding slowly down her shoulder. The white against her orange gown looked almost ceremonial, the kind of wound that refuses to bleed. "Relax, darling," Lydia cooed, turning to the crowd. "It's just a bit of fun. Don't take it so seriously." But her tone carried venom, not play. Someone near the champagne tower whispered, "I guess that's what happens when you crash a rich person's party." Another voice answered, "Who even invited her?" The orchestra tried to resume, timid, uncertain, but the violins trembled like they, too, wanted to leave. Ava's hand brushed a piece of cake from her wrist. She looked at it for a second, almost studying the color contrast, white cream melting against dark skin, then wiped it off with a linen napkin. Slow, deliberate. Her silence wasn't defeat. It was the kind of silence that rearranges gravity. "Maybe next time she'll learn to stay in her lane," Lydia said sweetly, raising her glass. Laughter rippled again, brittle and shallow. Ava looked up, her eyes finding Lydia's across the table. Not rage, not shame, just precision, the calm of someone calculating. The chandelier's reflections swirled in her pupils like twin storms held captive. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably, though no one understood why. A man lowered his phone. The violinist missed a note. The air felt thinner, colder. Then Ava smiled. Small, controlled. "You're right," she said softly, voice steady enough to cut through the laughter. "Some things do need to be cleaned up." Her tone didn't rise. It sank quiet, certain, unstoppable. Before anyone could answer, she stepped aside, took her clutch from the table, and pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered for a moment over the screen. One tap, a quiet vibration, a message delivered somewhere far beyond that room. The crowd thought she was texting in humiliation. They were wrong. She looked back once more at the cake, the symbol of privilege turned to weapon, and then at Lydia, who still basked in her audience. "Enjoy your dessert," Ava murmured. "It'll be the last thing you taste that's sweet for a while." The sentence hung there soft, almost kind, but it drained the laughter from every throat. The laughter didn't die. It stumbled, then limped on, nervous, fractured, desperate to pretend nothing had happened. The orchestra tried to fill the silence with strings, but the melody came out thin, unsure of its own tune. Lydia Fairchild clinked her glass against another, her diamond bracelet catching the light like a weapon. "Now everyone," she sang out, "let's move on. It's just a little cake. Don't make it bigger than it is." But she was already watching Ava, waiting for a reaction that never came. Ava stood near the edge of the crowd, wiping her hands with a napkin that had once been white. Her orange gown was ruined, a mosaic of sugar and shame. The smell of vanilla mixed with perfume, sweet, suffocating. People whispered behind champagne glasses. She should just leave. Security should have stopped her earlier. I heard she wasn't even on the guest list, and yet nobody told her to go. The kind of silence that followed her now wasn't permission, it was fear they didn't yet understand. Across the room, Lydia's co-host, a senator's wife, leaned in and whispered something that made her giggle again. They both glanced at Ava, their smiles tight, predatory, The flash of a camera lit the air. Someone was filming, always filming. A waiter approached Ava carefully, voice low. "Ma'am, would you like me to help you clean up?" She looked at him, not with anger, but with gentleness. "No, you'll stay. Everyone will." The young man froze, confused but obedient. The phrase echoed, soft, steady, yet commanding. It was the first time anyone in that room realized she wasn't someone to pity. From her table, Lydia leaned toward her friends. "You know how they are," she whispered, the words syruped with superiority. "Always overreacting, always playing the victim." Her audience nodded because it was easier to agree than to think. Ava's phone buzzed once in her clutch, one silent vibration, confirmation of something she had set in motion. She didn't check it. Not yet. Instead, she looked toward the grand piano, where the pianist avoided her eyes, pretending to read sheet music. The scent of fear has no color, but that night it smelled faintly of roses and burnt sugar. She walked back to the dessert table, calm as marble, and lifted a single fork from the mess of frosting. Her fingers didn't shake. "Such a beautiful cake," she said softly, to no one and to everyone. It's strange how something so sweet can taste like power. A few guests laughed awkwardly, uncertain whether it was safe. Lydia forced another smile. "Well, dear, maybe next time you'll try the chocolate. It hides stains better." The cruelty landed like a slap disguised as etiquette. Ava nodded once, her expression unreadable. "I'll keep that in mind." Then she turned to leave. Not rushed, not ashamed, just deliberate, every step measured like punctuation. Phones followed her exit, screens glowing pale across the ballroom. The crowd watched, pretending not to. No one stopped her. No one apologized. "Only one woman," the senator's wife whispered. "She handled that with class." And Lydia, still smiling too brightly, replied through her teeth, "She handled that with luck. And luck runs out." But even as she said it, her own reflection in the champagne glass trembled. Somewhere deep in her chest, a truth was beginning to stir, a truth colder than the marble beneath her feet. That woman wasn't leaving defeated. She was leaving in control. The moment the ballroom doors closed behind Ava Monroe, the room exhaled uneven, like a collective sigh of relief mixed with guilt. Laughter tried to crawl back, thin and artificial. But something invisible had already shifted. The scent of vanilla still hung in the air, but it wasn't sweet anymore. It smelled like a mistake. Lydia Fairchild lifted her glass again, her smile a little too bright. "Now then," she announced, "shall we continue with the auction?" Her voice wavered at the edges, betraying a flicker of unease she didn't want to name. She gestured to the stage, to the rows of polished items meant to symbolize generosity. But no one seemed to care. Eyes kept flicking toward the door Ava had disappeared through, as if the exit itself had become magnetic. Near the piano, the musician played the wrong note, soft, off-key, quickly covered. A drop of frosting slid down the leg of the dessert table, landing with a quiet plop. That tiny sound carried more weight than the orchestra. "Is she gone?" someone whispered. "Yes," another voice replied. "Finally." But even that answer didn't sound certain. Outside, a gust of cold wind blew through the corridor. Inside, the chandeliers swayed slightly, scattering fragments of light across the marble floor. The reflections looked like cracks. Lydia smoothed her gown, forcing a laugh. "People are too sensitive these days," she said to no one in particular. "You can't even joke anymore without someone making it dramatic." Her words floated out and fell flat, like pearls dropped into mud. No one answered. At a corner table, one of the donors, an elderly man with silver hair and the kind of wealth that came from old oil, set down his glass. "Do you know who she was?" he asked quietly. Lydia frowned. "Some PR guest, I suppose. A+1. He shook his head. "No. I've seen her before. Board meetings. Mergers. Monroe Equity." The name hung there, alien and heavy. A young intern nearby blinked. "Wait, the Monroe Equity?" Silence spread like ink. For the first time that evening, Lydia felt the ground beneath her confidence tilt. Her smile cracked, just slightly. "You're mistaken," she said. "She can't possibly." But the man's tone was calm, certain. "Oh, she can. And if I'm right, you just threw cake at one of the most powerful investors in the country." The words landed like thunder, muffled in velvet. Around the table, heads turned. The violinist stopped mid-note. Even the servers froze. Lydia's hand trembled. She tried to laugh again, but the sound was brittle. Nonsense. If that were true, she would have said something. She didn't have to, the man said. People like her don't announce power. They sign it. The ballroom temperature seemed to drop. The chandeliers no longer sparkled. They glared. Lydia looked around and found every pair of eyes suddenly cautious, no longer entertained but calculating. At the edge of the stage, a staff member whispered into a headset, confusion creasing his brow. "Ma'am, there's an issue with the foundation's accounts. Temporary freeze alert." Lydia's heart skipped. "That's impossible," she hissed. "We just finalized the transfer this morning," but the staffer's expression only deepened. "It's not just here. It's the entire network." She forced a smile, clutching her champagne. "A glitch, nothing more. They CC as film in the Ross House to play shop and duality problems. Better schaff to war off. Selfly doing crest is redder." Yet even she didn't believe it. For the first time in years, the queen of her own ballroom felt small, dwarfed not by wealth, but by the weight of her own arrogance. Somewhere in the distance, beneath the sound of cracking porcelain and faltering applause, the pianist whispered to himself, "She didn't leave," she started, and he was right. Outside the grand ballroom, Ava Monroe walked through the silent marble corridor as if nothing had happened. The laughter behind the doors faded into a muffled echo, meaningless noise dissolving into distance. Her heels clicked in measured rhythm, every step calm, deliberate, sovereign. She reached the end of the hallway, where the glass walls revealed the Chicago skyline glittering like a constellation of ambition. The city she had helped build quietly, relentlessly, without ever needing to announce her presence. Her assistant, Jordan, was waiting by the elevator, phone in hand, eyes wide with concern. "Ma'am, the withdrawal's in progress. Confirm all departments?" Ava nodded once. Every single one. Her voice was cool, not cold, the tone of someone too familiar with storms to raise her voice at thunder. The elevator doors slid open. Inside, the mirrored walls caught her reflection, frosting on silk, the residue of someone else's arrogance. For a moment, she studied it. Then she smiled faintly. "Leave it," she said when Jordan offered a cloth. "They'll remember it better this way." 15 minutes later, she was seated in the back of a black Maybach cutting through the city lights. The driver didn't speak. He knew better. Ava scrolled through her phone, watching confirmation notifications roll in like dominoes. Wire transfer. Canceled. Funding agreement. Terminated. Fairchild Foundation account. Frozen. Her empire was moving invisible, unstoppable, surgical. The kind of power that doesn't shout, only recalculates. Jordan glanced at her from the front seat. "You really think they'll connect it this fast?" Ava's gaze stayed on the skyline. "They already have. Lydia just doesn't understand it yet." The car slowed before a glass tower rising 40 floors above the river. The illuminated sign read, Monroe Equity Group, the company she had built from a one-room apartment 25 years ago, when the world laughed at the idea of a black woman running venture capital. Back then, she had borrowed $5,000, taken a second-hand laptop, and worked through nights that blurred into mornings. Every rejection had become a lesson. Every insult a map. Her grandmother used to say, "Let them talk, baby. Their noise is proof they noticed you." Ava had built an empire out of that noise. Inside her penthouse office, glass walls reflected the city's pulse. Jordan handed her a folder. "Here's the Fairchild audit. You were right, they've been covering losses for years. The gala tonight? A facade for new investors." Ava skimmed the numbers, unfazed. How deep? $4.2 billion in unsecured debt. Their foundation was the collateral. Ava closed the folder, calm. "Then tonight, we just saved the wrong people from saving themselves." Jordan hesitated. "Should we issue a statement?" She shook her head. "No. Let them write their own. Panic has a better PR team than we do." As she spoke, her phone vibrated an incoming message from an unknown number. Just one line. "Who do you think you are? LF." Ava typed back without a pause. "The woman you should have Googled before serving dessert." "I the sea dined. On the sea that." She set the phone down, gaze drifting out toward the skyline again. From here, Chicago looked calm, a city asleep, unaware that by morning, its headlines would read differently. She whispered, more to herself than to Jordan. "Power isn't loud. It's patient." Then she turned toward the window's reflection, the faint shimmer of frosting still on her dress. A reminder not a stain. Get some rest, she said softly. Tomorrow's going to be loud for everyone else. And as the city lights shimmered against the glass, the woman they thought they humiliated was already rewriting their future, one transaction at a time. The morning broke over Chicago like judgment gray, deliberate, inevitable. Inside Monroe Equity's headquarters, the hum of servers filled the air like a mechanical heartbeat. Screens glowed across the operations floor, each one reflecting a single, synchronized command. Transfer, canceled. Access, revoked. Account, frozen. Ava Monroe stood before the glass wall of her office. Phone in hand, coffee untouched. She had slept 2 hours, maybe less. Not because she was restless, but because precision doesn't need rest, it needs momentum. Jordan entered quietly, tablet pressed to her chest. The numbers are confirmed, she said. All Fairchild Holdings liquidated before dawn. Their hedge line collapsed by 6:45. Banks are calling. Media's circling. Ava nodded, eyes fixed on the skyline. And Lydia? She's calling too. Ava turned slightly, the corner of her mouth tightening. Let her wait. Sometimes silence educates faster than an answer. Across the city, the Fairchild penthouse was chaos in designer robes. Lydia stood barefoot in the middle of the marble floor, surrounded by frantic assistants. Her husband, Charles Fairchild, shouted into a phone. What do you mean all accounts frozen? This is a misunderstanding. Get Monroe on the line now. But no one could. Ava's name had already vanished from their contact lists, their inboxes, even their joint investment platforms. On one of the screens, a news alert popped up. Monroe Equity withdraws $4. 2B funding Fairchild Group in crisis. Lydia's breath caught. This can't be real. An assistant stammered. Ma'am, the auditors are demanding a full disclosure within 24 hours. Her voice cracked. We don't have 24 hours. She stumbled toward the balcony, staring out at the city below. The same skyline that had applauded her last night now looked indifferent, silent, watching. Why would she do this? Lydia whispered. Her husband looked up, pale. What did you say to her? Lydia turned defensive. Nothing. I was being charming. Lydia, he said sharply, what did you do? And in that moment, her silence was louder than confession. Back at Monroe Equity, Ava walked through the strategy floor, calm, unhurried. Staff paused as she passed, the kind of reverence that doesn't come from fear but from awe. She stopped beside Jordan's desk. Release a short note, she said. Just one line. Jordan looked up. To the press? Ava nodded. To everyone. She dictated slowly. Monroe Equity believes in respect as the foundation of all partnerships. When that collapses, so does everything built on it. Jordan typed, press send. The statement went live within minutes. Elegant, surgical, impossible to misinterpret. Within the hour, major outlets ran the headline. Ava Monroe ends $4. 2B deal over respect. Is yes CR, is yes CR, and will die. The phrasing was perfect. It wasn't revenge. It was principle. And principle, in the right hands, bankrupts arrogance faster than law ever could. By noon, phones rang nonstop. Other investors, sponsors, even politicians wanted to know what happened at the gala. Ava didn't take a single call. She sat at her desk, reviewing documents for her next acquisition. The faint smear of frosting, still visible on the sleeve of her gown, now hanging behind her office door. Jordan approached softly. They're panicking, she said. The markets are bleeding. Ava looked up, eyes steady. Good. Let the world learn that humiliation is expensive. Outside, cameras began to gather at the tower's entrance, reporters shouting questions into the wind. Inside, Ava simply said, cancel my meetings for today. Jordan blinked. All of them? Ava turned back to the skyline. Everything. Let the silence speak. And May Safwan of the Jame. Across Chicago, Lydia Fairchild's empire was collapsing in real time. Stock plunging, investors fleeing, creditors circling. Every screen that once carried her image now carried her failure. And somewhere in the noise of a city suddenly paying attention, one quiet truth began to echo. Power doesn't scream. It recalculates. By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, Chicago was feeding on the story. News anchors repeated Ava Monroe's name with equal parts awe and confusion. The footage from the gala, Lydia Fairchild's perfect smile, the cake, the laughter had gone viral. A caption under every replay read, "The $4? To be mistake." At the Fairchild penthouse, night brought no comfort. Reporters crowded the gates. Drones hovered above the balcony. Inside, Lydia sat motionless on the edge of her sofa, phone in hand, face pale in the glow of the screen. The same social media accounts that once worshipped her now swarmed with disgust. Comments scrolled faster than she could breathe. "You humiliated her now, she owns you. That cake aged like karma. Respect is free. You couldn't afford it." Her husband paced the floor. "Lydia, you've destroyed us. The board's resigning, the lenders are demanding repayment, and the foundation—" "Stop it," she snapped. "It's a misunderstanding. She'll forgive me once I explain." He stared at her, disbelief hardening his tone. "Explain what? That you turned a charity event into a spectacle?" Lydia's phone buzzed again, another message she couldn't ignore. It was a photo. Ava, standing in front of the Monroe Equity logo, frosting still faint on her gown, shaking hands with the city's mayor. The caption beneath, "New partnership announced, the Monroe Scholarship Fund for Underprivileged Youth." Lydia's lips parted, no sound coming out. The humiliation had gone global, and Ava had rewritten the narrative, turning the same $4 to-be deal into a symbol of justice. At Monroe Tower, the air hummed with quiet triumph. The staff moved efficiently, respectful but electric with energy. Ava stood before the panoramic window, watching the night pulse below her like a living heartbeat. Jordan entered, tablet in hand. "The numbers just updated," she said. "Fairchild stock fell another 30%. They're begging for a statement." Ava didn't turn. "And the foundation?" "Frozen. Auditors are inside. Media is tearing it apart." Ava finally looked over her shoulder. "Good. Corruption hides best under chandeliers. Tonight we just turned on the lights." Jordan hesitated. "You could go public, ma'am. Tell your side, it'd make you a legend." Ava's gaze drifted back to the skyline. Legends talk. Legacies act. Her phone vibrated again, a call from an unknown number. She answered it without emotion. "Miss Fairchild." The line was silent for a second before Lydia's trembling voice broke through. "Ava, please. Let's fix this. We can rebuild the partnership. I'll issue an apology, a statement, anything you want." Ava's reply was almost kind. "You think this is about statements? It was a mistake. I didn't mean to—" "You meant every word," Ava said, her tone quiet as rain but cutting as glass. "The only mistake was assuming I was beneath you." Lydia's breath hitched. "You're ruining me." Ava's voice softened. "No, you did that when you chose cruelty over grace." She paused, letting silence do the rest. "And Lydia." "Yes? Next time you host a gala, serve humility. It lasts longer than cake." The line went dead. Jordan watched as Ava set the phone down. "That was poetic." Ava smiled faintly. "No, that was proportionate." Outside, camera flashes painted the night sky white. A reporter shouted from below, "Miss Monroe, do you have a message for the Fairchild family?" Ava didn't look down. Her answer wasn't for them. It was for every person who'd ever been humiliated and stayed quiet. She whispered, barely above the hum of the city, "Dignity doesn't beg. It recalculates." And with that, she turned off the lights, letting the skyline burn in her reflection, calm, certain, untouchable. By dawn, the Fairchild name was no longer whispered with admiration. It was trending with ruin. Every news outlet in the country had picked up the story. Headlines pulsed across morning screens like electric scars. Gala host humiliates black CEO. Loses $4. To be overnight. Monroe Equity ends partnership after racist incident. And the cross. From cake to collapse, the Fairchild fallout. The footage played on a loop. Lydia's laughter. The frosting. The silence that followed. Commentators didn't need to dramatize it. The video itself was a confession. In the penthouse that once symbolized old money perfection, panic had replaced champagne. Assistants were shredding documents, phones rang unanswered, and every attempt to call a lawyer came back with the same response. Conflict of interest. Lydia sat in her study, staring at her reflection in the dark window, the woman who had once ruled charity circuits, now reduced to a headline hashtag. The pearls at her neck looked heavier than ever. "This can't be my ending," she whispered. Her husband entered quietly, phone trembling in his hand. The banks froze our lines. The auditors from Monroe Equity. They're cooperating with federal regulators. Lydia, it's over. There is lovid. She spun on him, her voice sharp and shaking. She's doing this to destroy us. He sighed. No, she's doing this to remind us who we destroyed first. Across the city, Monroe Tower was alive with calm precision. The same team that once handled billion-dollar acquisitions now managed a different kind of operation. Cleanup, reputation, restoration. Jordan stepped into Ava's office, her voice low but charged. Every outlet wants a quote. CNN, Bloomberg, even Vogue. They all want to know if this was retaliation. Ava didn't look up from her desk. It wasn't. It was a rebalancing. Jordan smiled faintly. That's exactly what they'll quote. Ava closed the file in front of her. Prepare the donation announcement. To the scholarship fund? Yes, the entire $4.2 billion. Transfer it publicly. Transparency is the loudest answer. Jordan hesitated. You're giving it all? And met her guard on the weed in no pine. Ava's gaze met her steady, resolute. Money is cyclical. Dignity compounds. At the same hour, reporters had gathered outside the collapsing Fairchild headquarters. One of the massive LED banners that had once displayed their logo now flickered, glitching between static and darkness. A technician tried to reset it, but the feed refused to stabilize until suddenly the screen came alive again. Black background, white text, simple, unmistakable. Monroe Equity Scholarship Initiative, $4.2 billion for future builders. The crowd erupted. Phones rose. Hashtags ignited. Inside Monroe Tower, Ava watched the live feed. No celebration crossed her face, only quiet closure. That's the real investment, she murmured. Jordan exhaled. You just rewrote history. Ava's answer was soft. No, I just corrected it. Back in the Fairchild penthouse, Lydia's phone pinged a new alert. She looked down to see the same banner plastered across every major network, her name buried beneath it. Her vision blurred. She gave it away, she whispered. All of it. Charles shook his head. She didn't give it away. She reclaimed it. Lydia stumbled to her dressing table, hands trembling. The pearls she'd once used as armor now felt like chains. She ripped them off, scattering them across the marble floor. They rolled away, clicking like the sound of falling power. For the first time, Lydia Fairchild realized something brutal. Ava hadn't taken her empire. She had erased its illusion. Outside, the city thrummed. Screens glowed. People talked. But in Ava's office, there was only stillness, the kind that follows justice finally landing where it belongs. The next morning, the city woke under a different rhythm. For decades, the Fairchild name had towered over Chicago's skyline, etched on buildings, whispered in galas, wrapped in inherited entitlement. But today, it was gone. Removed from the foundation plaques, scrubbed from the lobby walls. In its place, a new banner unfurled across the front of Monroe Tower. The Grandma Rose Foundation, empowering future generations. The same $4.2 billion that once propped up an empire of arrogance was now reallocated to scholarships, housing grants, and youth programs across the country. In a sunlit conference room on the 38th floor, Ava Monroe stood before a semicircle of journalists. She looked composed, elegant, but there was a quiet gravity to her presence. Her burnt orange suit mirrored the gown she had worn to the gala, the color now reclaimed, no longer a target, but a statement. Miss Monroe, a reporter asked, voice cautious, is it true you redirected the full $4.2 billion from the Fairchild Partnership into this fund overnight? Ava smiled slightly. True. It's the fastest transaction I've ever approved. The room laughed softly, but her tone held no mockery, just resolve. Another journalist leaned forward. Was this decision motivated by revenge? Her answer came without hesitation. No. Revenge spends power. Redistribution refines it. My grandmother scrubbed the floors of women who looked like Lydia Fairchild. Today, her name funds their daughters' futures. That's not vengeance, that's correction. Flashbulbs erupted. Cameras clicked like applause. Behind her, the foundation's new emblem glowed on a massive LED screen. A single rose, gold against black, petals opening upward. Beneath it, a quote read, "Dignity is not granted, it's remembered." Including from the Prava, Ava continued, her voice steady. We don't erase history by pretending it didn't happen. We rewrite it by changing who holds the pen. For a moment, the room fell utterly silent. Even the photographer stopped shooting. It wasn't just a press conference. It was a reckoning spoken in perfect poise. Later that afternoon, Ava walked through the Foundation's new headquarters, a repurposed Fairchild property that once hosted elite luncheons. Now its marble halls echoed with new voices: young interns, scholarship recipients, staff setting up workstations. A teenage girl paused near the grand staircase, staring at the gilded family crest still carved into the wall. "Will that stay?" she asked shyly. Ava looked at it, the Fairchild name chiseled deep into stone. "For now," she said, "it's part of the story. Every scar should be visible. The Aussies assumen, sapper generalite. But it's through blast." The girl nodded, and Ava smiled, touching her shoulder. "You'll build something better right on top of it." That evening, Ava returned to her penthouse. The city shimmered beneath her, not conquered but understood. On her table sat a small box wrapped in linen. Jordan had left it with a note: "For closure." Inside was a single white rose sculpted from sugar, the same kind used to decorate the cake from the gala. The irony made her smile. She placed it beside her grandmother's photo, framed in silver. "Full circle," she whispered. Her phone buzzed another message from Lydia Fairchild. This one wasn't angry. It was desperate. "Please, let me meet you. I want to apologize." Ava stared at the screen for a moment, then typed slowly: "Apology accepted. Meeting unnecessary." She pressed send, then turned the phone face down. Some lessons didn't need an audience. Outside, the city was still talking. News anchors debated her motives. Hashtags split into two sides, some calling her ruthless, others calling her revolutionary. But Ava didn't read any of it. She didn't need to. On her balcony, she sipped black coffee as the skyline faded into dusk. Wind rustled through her hair, carrying the faint hum of life below, children laughing, sirens wailing, a city alive because people like her refused to be invisible. Jordan stepped out beside her. "You know," she said quietly, "you could have just sued them. You could have taken their money." Ava smiled without looking away from the horizon. "Money can be reclaimed. Respect has to be taught. Do you think they learned?" Ava tilted her head, the evening light catching her earrings like tiny embers. "Some lessons aren't meant for them. They're meant for everyone watching." The sky deepened to copper. For a moment, the reflection of the city lights shimmered across the balcony, glass flickering like a crown that fit her perfectly. She raised her cup slightly, as if toasting the night itself. "To Grandma Rose," she murmured, "to every woman who had to swallow silence and smile through insult. This is for them." Behind her, the new Foundation's logo glowed faintly on a digital billboard. "Justice doesn't shout, it reallocates." And down below, a reporter signing off the evening news put it best: "She didn't just end a deal, she redefined what power looks like." A week later, the world had moved on, but not really. The Fairchild name was gone from the skyline, yet its echo lived on as a cautionary tale. Business schools dissected it. Journalists called it the cake lesson. And in every conversation about dignity, one name lingered like a signature: Ava Monroe. She never gave another interview. She didn't need to. Her silence became the statement. The Grandma Rose Foundation opened its first scholarship house on the South Side that Friday. Ava stood quietly in the back of the ceremony as a young girl cut the ribbon, smiling through nerves. Cameras searched for her, but she stayed out of frame. The story wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to those who'd inherit its meaning. When the applause rose, she looked up at the banner fluttering above the doorway. "Built from respect, funded by courage." Ava smiled. Later that evening, alone in her penthouse, she placed the last piece of that cursed cake, now hardened and fragile, on her balcony railing. The city breeze lifted the crumbs into the night like dust returning to the stars. "Justice," she whispered, "isn't about noise. It's about balance." The lose have to gaze, travel on, and somewhere far below, the lights of Chicago shimmered back as if the city itself agreed. Before we close, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. Thank you for watching. This was Ava Monroe.